Good evening, everyone. My name is Lexi Neubauer, and I'm from Saguenay Native Plant Community. And I'm here with Kathy Bryla,
Hi, everyone.
and we're here to talk about beautiful and easy native plants for birds. So we're really excited about this free webinar to help you get started with native plants in your backyard that are going to attract a multitude of beautiful birds to your backyard. And you're going to become a bird expert after planting these plants and seeing all these friendly little visitors coming into your yard. So the first thing we want to talk about is just why are native plants so important to birds? Here we've got a little black-capped chickadee sitting on an American plum tree, and really everything that birds need to survive, they can find in our native plants and in our native trees and our native shrubs. So what we're going to look at first of all is what birds eat, because we need to know what they eat and how these plants and these shrubs and trees support them. So birds, what they eat really depends on the shape of their beak. Some birds have very long beaks like a woodpecker or a jay. Some have tiny little beaks like that chickadee we just looked at. And some have really interesting long hooked beaks like a hummingbird. And all of these beaks have been designed to access the different nutrition in nuts, berries, fruits, caterpillars, insects, seeds, and nectar that they need to survive. And one of the things that we're going to show that's so critical to the livelihood of our birds is that they really need caterpillars, and caterpillars depend on our native plants. And then just a little misnomer is that birds really do not eat many worms. Robins, American robins, you'll always see them looking for worms, but the most of our bird friends do not eat worms.
Interesting. So here we have our food chain, and we at the bottom of the food chain for birds. The bottom of the food chain, we have our native trees and shrubs on one side, and our native plants or forbs, our flowering native perennial plants on the right side. And we from our native trees and shrubs, we get a lot of nuts and we get berries. But we also get a lot of caterpillars on those native trees and shrubs. So in the future, we're going to be doing another talk specifically about native trees and shrubs. But that's, they host a lot of caterpillars that the birds need, but our native smaller plants do as well. And those baby birds are really dependent on those caterpillars. But for the native plants, that's where we get a lot more of the insects that the shrubs as well, because those insects and other pollinators are going to be on those flowers when the shrubs are flowering. But a lot of our native plants that the insects love to go to, and they pollinate. And then when they pollinate them, then we get seeds, and those seeds are just so essential to our birds. They get them through most birds through the winter, through the cold weather. They're living on those seeds from native plants. And then, of course, we have the native plants that also give nectar. And that nectar is extremely important. Not only is it drawing insects that then the birds can find and feed to their young, but it's also providing the nectar that our hummingbirds need and live on to give them all the energy to fly in place, the amazing way, that they're able to hover, but they sure burn a lot of energy. And so that sugary nectar from native plants is what keeps them going.
So we're going to look a little bit into what kind of birds eat these different things. So the nuts are really interesting because we've got the nuthatches, the tufted titmouse, red-bellied woodpecker, and blue jays who all love to eat nuts, and they eat them in sort of different ways. I just wanted to mention too that we're talking about birds that are really, you can see within Illinois, where we're located. A lot of these birds live year-round within at least the eastern United States, if not most of the continental United States. So these are very common birds that you can see in your backyard. And the cool thing is that what supports them is not necessarily bird feeders, although bird feeders are great too, and it's a great way to attract even more birds to your yard. But if you have the right trees and plants, you're going to attract just as many, if not more, and it's free because we all know that filling up that bird feeder can get expensive after a while. But just some little quick tidbits about these birds that like nuts. We've got this one on the left called a nuthatch, and this one gets its name from their habit of jamming large nuts and acorns into tree bark, and then they whack them with their little bill to hatch out the seed from inside. They do also eat seeds and insects, and we're going to go over that in a couple more slides of just how diversified their diets are. But they all have kind of a preferred foods and things that they might eat seasonally too. The tufted titmouse is also a very common bird that you might see during the summer. And this one during the summer will eat the insects and caterpillars, but they also love acorns and beech nuts.
Isn't that a
And then
cute name? Isn't that a cute name?
so cute. And you could see how it could kind of be misconfused with the nuthatch because their coloring is pretty similar. But the little titmouse has a little mohawk. And then the nuthatch is so cool because he goes upside down. So if you do see him on a bird feeder, he'll probably be upside down. Everybody else will be the right way up. But he just has his own way of doing things, or she. And then we have the red-bellied woodpecker, and this, you can see the beak on the woodpecker is a little bit bigger. They love to eat insects and spiders, and that's why they're drilling holes into the trees is to get out those insects. But they also eat tons of acorns, nuts, pine cones, and then seeds from our native plants, and even fruit and nectar. And then the blue jay, Kathy, if you could tell us your story about the blue jay, because they're so intelligent and just so fascinating to
They're so
watch.
intelligent, and I'm also admiring Lexi the photo that you have here of the blue jay because look at how you can really see like the texture of those feathers, and he just looks so soft. It's just like you want to pet him. He probably wouldn't be too happy. He'd go nah, but he looks so soft. But I have quite a few blue jays around my house in the winter. I don't see them too much in the summer, but in the winter they're around. And I always see them hiding things or retrieving things. I have two large river birches near me that in my on my property that have that peeling bark. And they're always like hiding and retrieving nuts and acorns and other things from those trees. And I know that a lot of it is acorns too, because I'm always getting little oak saplings trying to come up right under my birch trees. And I'm thinking, I hate to pull them because they're oak trees, but it's like, you really don't belong 1 foot from this birch tree, big stump, but I know they're coming there because these guys are caching acorns in the birch bark, and it's like falling out at some point, and a tree is growing.
And they're so intelligent, they'll watch squirrels, trying to hide acorns, and then they'll go and take those acorns from the
Really?
squirrels. And they can carry up to 5 acorns at a time. So they
Wow.
can they can put 5 within their beak and kind of their throat area, and then one in their claw, and then I think one on their beak as well. So fascinating creature. And then actually the blue is really interesting too because their feathers are not really blue. They are brown and kind of a gray, and the light reflecting on the feathers is what gives it that blue look, which is kind of the same as hummingbirds. The ruby-throated hummingbird, those feathers reflect the light and do certain things. So many interesting and fascinating things about these birds, and we just want to keep them around so we can learn more about them. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, let's talk about berries and fruits because there's so many birds that just love berries and fruits, and it's really nice to have those flowering native shrubs because those berries will last a really long time. Like how long does your service berry, those berries last for?
Not very long because the robins start watching it. They start eating those before they're even fully ripe. I mean, service berries have to be like one of the number 1 favorite berries of birds because they don't even get a chance to ripen and they're cleaning them off. Now, my winter berries, they're blooming in the backyard, and some of them are eaten by, November, but there were a few hanging on that were still being eaten in December and January.
It might
But
choke berries too. For some reason, maybe because they're so tart, they
maybe
didn't get eaten, but you know, they do last a long time if for some reason they're not as interested as the service berry.
the service berry must just be so good.
Yeah,
I would know I don't ever get any.
right, they're gone. So here you'll see some of our omnivores, like the blue jay. The blue jay loves the nuts, but it also loves the berries and the fruits, and the same with the tufted titmouse. The house finch in particular, now this is a bird that is not actually native to around here. It's come from the western US, and it's kind of very fond of our suburban and urban areas. These little birds mate for life, and they stay together in pairs, but they eat almost exclusively all plant materials, so seeds, buds, and fruits. The song sparrow, most people will probably recognize this little bird, and how cute is this little bird?
Mhm.
But during the summer, it'll eat seeds or it'll eat insects, and then seeds and fruits all year round. So whatever it can find, those berries, it's going to get them. The northern cardinals mainly eat seeds and fruits and supplement with insects. Interesting thing about the cardinals is that they actually do not migrate. So they can be seen in our region and the eastern United States year round. But again, they also like to supplement with insects. And then we've got the super cute black-capped chickadee. And this one resides year-round in Illinois as well, and much of the northern United States. And they'll eat about half seeds and berries and other plant material, and the other half of their diet is insects during the winter. But in the spring, insects and spiders will make up to 80 to 90% of their diet. So if you're a person who doesn't like spiders, you want to attract these birds. And it'll take care of the spiders that might be in your backyard. And then one of these that is kind of rare to see, I've never seen this. Have you seen a cedar waxwing?
I have. You know where I saw them? For those of you who are in our area, I saw them one spring. I think they must have been migrating, and there was a flock of them at Lake Catherine.
Oh, wow.
So that was the one time that I have seen them, and it's just because I happened to be there on a day where they were flying through and they just landed and found some kind of a tree with berries on it. So I was treated to see them in person, and they're amazing.
And that's exactly it. If you want to attract waxwings to your yard, you really should plant native trees and shrubs that bear small fruit. So dogwood, serviceberry, cedar, juniper, hawthorn, and winterberry. That's what they're going to come for. But look how cool that mask is. I mean, I just would love to see one of these. Maybe this summer I will go to Lake Catherine and get to see one. Okay, so nectar, there's not that many birds in our area actually that eat nectar. And the ruby-throated hummingbird is the most famous one. And obviously because it's got this really long beak, it can go further into that flower and get that super sweet nectar than any of the other insects that visit this flower. So it's got a huge advantage into getting the nectar source. And there's those little red feathers are actually reflecting the light, and that's how they look red. So this one, in particular, the hummingbird is Eastern North America's sole breeding hummingbird. So enjoy them while they're around, because in the early fall they're going to Central America. So they like anything that's red and yellow. They like the nectar of orange tubular flowers, such as this red columbine, cardinal flower, honeysuckle, jewel weed, bee balm, which is my background today, red buckeye and red morning glory, and sometimes tree sap. They can sometimes catch insects midair, but most of the time they just want the nectar. Then we've got these purple finches, who this is going to be a very rare bird to see, but other birds will peck at the base of the flower, and they'll get the nectar that way because they don't have that beak that can reach so long into these flowers. And Baltimore Orioles, people know this bird because they'll leave out oranges in their backyard to attract the Orioles. They just love fruit, but they also love the nectar too. So anything sugary is going to attract those Orioles.
They have such a pretty sound. There's just such clarity to the sound that they make.
Do they visit your yard then?
I was fortunate enough a couple of years to have them around for 2, 3 days, and then they moved on. but they were around a few days eating from, I had a hummingbird feeder out there, and I did put some grape jelly out for the Orioles, and they were all about it, but they still only stayed a few days because they were not settling down to nest yet, I guess. I guess they were still migrating.
They're on the move.
They were on the move.
Okay, now you can really see that so many of these birds rely on insects and just kind of the overlap here. So there's only a couple here that we haven't kind of talked about yet, but the first one is this American robin. And this is the one that will eat worms. You'll see them hopping around in your lawn. Super ubiquitous bird across North America. But they also eat other insects and some snails too. So if you're somebody who doesn't like snails, this is your bird. They'll also eat an enormous variety of fruits. So like you said, the service berry, they will definitely go for that. Another one that we haven't talked about is the little yellow warbler, and there's a lot of different kinds of warblers. I have yet to see one. Do you get these ones, Kathy?
I have, and I have to admit to everybody, I mean, I live in a very, suburban, urban area, and I, have been planting for birds and sometimes feeding birds for a couple of decades now, and I have kept a list of the different species that I had found in my yard. And in the suburbs of Chicago, I am up to about 65 different species that have visited my yard. And
Wow.
it's just kind of amazing. You think, oh, maybe out in the country. No, they're right here in our suburban area. So I have had the opportunity to see a couple of like more like the yellow-rumped warbler and another warbler on migration. Yes.
Very cool.
Cute little things. I have some photos.
Yeah, and they definitely like insects more than anything else. Supposedly they don't really like backyard feeders as much as they like their insects. So they typically like midges, caterpillars, beetles, leafhoppers, and other bugs, and even wasps. I mean, it's amazing what some of these birds will eat. And a lot of different pests that, we want to get rid of and we don't want on our fruits and vegetables that we're growing.
Absolutely.
Okay, now seeds. This is also one that's so super important, and you can see the variety of birds that rely on seeds. Juncos, which we've got here, the dark-eyed junco is called the snowbird of the middle latitude. Over most of the eastern United States, they appear as winter sets in and then retreat northward each spring. So they're primarily seed eaters. During the breeding season, they'll also eat insects as well, including beetles, moths, butterflies, caterpillars, ants, wasps, and flies. Right next to it, the mourning dove. A lot of people will probably recognize the call of the mourning dove because it sounds kind of like an owl, whoo, but it's in the middle of the day, so it's definitely not an owl. Very graceful bird and one of the most abundant birds in the United States. There's an estimated 350 million mourning doves in the United States, and seeds make up 99% of their diet. And we have to mention the goldfinch too, because goldfinches eat seeds almost exclusively. They're not going to eat too many insects. And to encourage them to come to your yard, you want to make sure you plant native milkweed, purple coneflower, Prairie Coreopsis, and Blackeyed Susan. We're going to go over the plants in just a minute that are going to attract all of these birds and making all those connections with the food chain, the seeds that they need, the nectar, the caterpillars, which are so vitally important, and of course, all of the insects.
So because they need the seeds so badly, they need it both in the summer, but they also need it in the winter. And remember, winter seed heads on our native plants are nature's bird feeder. So please, when you're in the fall, when you have that desire to clean up your yard, please leave the seed heads until spring, because they're what are going to sustain the birds throughout the winter. They really need those leftover seeds from our native plants.
And come this spring, they'll be stripped, right? All of those seeds will be
They'll be
gone.
stripped. It's so interesting because I leave them there, but now when I'm going back and cutting them all off in the spring, there's nothing left on these things. You look at those cone flowers and stuff, that there is not a seed to be found. And even in the winter, when I did have a couple bird feeders up, they seem to choose the seeds from the native plants out there much more heavily than the bird feeders. They go to the bird feeders more towards spring when those are depleted, but in early, like in late fall, early winter, they were gobbling up everything from those native plants. So that's what they really prefer, those fresh seeds right off the plants. Also, in your planting beds, please leave the leaves, twigs, and wood. That debris on the planting in your planting beds, remove it from your lawn, but from the planting beds, that is what is going to and it can provide a lot of cover for our winter birds, but it also provides shelter and habitat for a lot of the larvae for insects and pollinators for the next year. And so the larva is underneath that leaf debris, and the birds are finding it and eating it, and it's helping sustain them throughout the winter. So please leave those leaves because the birds need those insects. And not only do they need native plants for for all the food they eat, they need it for their comfort and security and housing. They use many parts of many native plants to, for example, build their nests. Here's part of the milkweed plant, and this is like a favorite, that furry, soft fluff. They will use that to line their nests. The native grasses, favorites for building nests. I have a number of prairie dropseed out in front, and there's always robins and other types of birds, sparrows, grabbing that old grass from last year, taking that seems to be one of their favorites. They love the old brown fronds of or leaves of prairie dropseed. They just love to build their nests of that. And those grasses and that are kind of hanging over and brown in the winter, that's creating a lot of habitat where they can go and they can stay warm, they can hide from predators, and also they can find insects and insect larvae under that to eat, to sustain them for the winter. And this isn't just about the birds. It's not all for the birds. We love birds and we want to take care of birds just for the sake of birds. But we have to remember that these very birds that we're trying to save, and remember, we've lost about 3 billion birds in recent decades. So as native plants disappear and therefore insects disappear, our birds are disappearing. That's why we want to bring these native plants back into our landscapes to help the birds. But by doing that, we're also going to help ourselves, because birds are absolutely essential to our ecosystem. We couldn't get by without them. They keep destructive agricultural and forest insects in check. They help to pollinate flowering plants across the globe. So important when it comes to pollination in the rainforest, considered the lungs of the earth. Birds supply waste removal services that prevent disease. They spread seed and bring plants back to destroyed ecosystems. And they help sustain forests, marshes, grasslands, and prairies. By doing this, they help store carbon and keep our climate stable. So birds, they are really the sowers and tenders of all of our natural areas. And therefore, the ecosystem services they provide for us are just, something we can't get by without. Thank you, birds.
So now we're going to look at our plants that support these beautiful creatures.
And before we get into the plants, can I just say one thing? We're going to go into the plants, but please, if you would be so kind, please, if you feel like the content that we're providing is interesting and useful to you, please hit the subscribe button. The more subscribers we get, the more our video is served to people and easier for people to find on YouTube. And so we want this information to get into as many gardeners' minds as possible. So please subscribe. Go ahead, Lexi.
All right. So we really hope that this next section of information is going to help you in selecting the plants for your garden that are going to support these birds and all these creatures and really bring so much life into your residential landscape. And also maybe change a few of your neighbors' minds too, that wow, these plants are really phenomenal and something special, and you're creating your own little mini ecosystem on your block. So we just wanted to mention too that they are well-behaved plants. These are not plants that are going to turn your whole yard into a prairie. Although if you want to do that, more power to you as well. But they are dependable, hardy, wonderful plants. They don't require the amount of water that, planting that very common hydrangea that you can find at Home Depot is going to require. These plants are really sturdy and will stand the test of time. You plant them once and you kind of just can forget about it.
Plant and forget.
That's what we like. Easy gardening.
Yeah.
So speaking of easy gardening, you want to know what plant hardiness zone that you're in. Here in the suburbs of Chicago, we're in zone 6A, so a little green blip right there by the corner of Lake Michigan. A lot of these plants that we're covering tonight go from hardiness zone 3 all the way to 9, I believe. And so that's all the way from up in northern Minnesota all the way down to Florida. So if you can believe that, these plants are so hardy and can do well in many, many different states. And we'll be talking a little bit more about the features of each one.
What a range. Okay, the first one we're going to talk about is wild columbine. And you saw this in one of the previous photos with a cute little hummingbird feeding out of it. This is such a beautiful plant, loved by those hummingbirds. And it grows 1 to 3 feet tall. So it's a little guy, but it has the most beautiful foliage. It's like rounded, it's just gorgeous foliage. So even when it's done blooming, the foliage on that just stays beautiful all summer. It likes medium to dry soil, full sun to full shade. If that's not adaptable, I don't know what is. Think of that, full sun to full shade. It'll bloom in May and June, and it's attractive to both pollinators and hummingbirds. It is also a larval host plant, and what that means is there is some species of our native butterflies or moths whose caterpillars can feed exclusively on this native plant. So it feeds the caterpillars of some of our native species of butterflies and moths. Remember, we said a little while ago how imperative those caterpillars are to our birds. In fact, Doug Tallamy did research at the University of Delaware and found that it takes approximately 9,000 caterpillars to raise one brood of chickadees, and that's just until they fledge the nest. So that is a lot of caterpillars. So if we don't have native plants in our landscapes, where are they going to get those caterpillars? They're not. So they're not going to be successful at breeding. It's a very adaptable plant that grows well in many light conditions. It also tolerates a wide range of soils, but it does need good drainage. It doesn't want its feet wet all the time. And it is one of the very few red native plants in the Midwest. It's good. It will grow in zones 3 to 8. And I want to mention over on the right side of the particular photo that we have, you're going to see a number of, words. Like for this one, it says nectar and caterpillars. So on that side, what we're going to be showing is what these different species of plants offer to our birds, how, in what ways they help sustain our birds. So this one, again, direct eating of nectar and providing caterpillars for the young baby birds.
And that caterpillar, the Columbine Dusky Wing. I always have trouble saying that. I want to say Dusky Skywing, but I think it's Dusky Wing. But a lot of these plants have moths or butterflies that are named after them, and that just reiterates the point that these plants have co-evolved with their insects, and they have insects that depend on them to survive, and of course makes the whole food chain go around.
And truly, you plant it, they will come. I have seen those dusky wing butterflies in my yard since I started growing columbine.
It's amazing. So
Mm-hmm.
amazing. Keep documenting it all. I
I
want to see the
know.
long list.
Everybody's like, what a nerd. This woman needs to get out of her yard a little bit, right?
It's just so much fun. It's so much to see fun to see life all around you. The next one is really important for nectar as well. This is called foxglove beard tongue or Penstemon digitalis. This one also does quite well in many different light conditions, from full sun to part shade. And it also has beautiful foliage. So it does bloom for 2 long months, but once the blooming is over, it has gorgeous foliage as well to really round out your garden. Prefers medium to dry soil. This one is super duper easy to grow, and it actually supports 8 different caterpillar species. So,
Yay.
yay, it supports the Chalcedony midget, the geranium plume moth, the confused haploa, American bordered sallow, the Verbena bud moth, the Baltimore and purple lined sallow, and the mouse colored pyrophilia. So I'm sure I didn't say some of those correctly, but just the fact that it supports all of those caterpillars and we know how important they are for the birds is just amazing.
And even if you didn't say it correctly, it's the effort that counts.
Thank you. I try. It's also an important source of nectar, so the hummingbirds will definitely visit this plant, and lots of our native bees as well. They love the Penstemon digitalis, and this one's good in zones 4 to 8.
Beautiful. Okay, now we have blue vervain, or our native verbena, Verbena hestata. This will get a little bit taller, but not too tall, 2 to 4 feet. It likes full sun to part shade, so it's very adaptable. Very, beautiful, delicate flowers, gradually open up down those long stems. It just has such a delicate look to me. It'll do well in medium to dry soil. It is a long blooming plant. Think of that, it'll bloom July through September. So very, very long period of time where it's giving you color. It's an important nectar source. So it's giving nectar to hummingbirds, to butterflies, moths, bees that like nectar. It's great for butterfly gardens. Those butterflies love that nectar in this. It also is a larval host plant. Not sure how many species, but this is the host plant to the larva of some of our native butterflies and moths. And remember what that means, caterpillars, and caterpillars equals happy baby birds. And it's a very non-aggressive native plant. It's not going to spread itself all over. It pretty much just stays where you plant it and behaves very well. It's also very drought resistant. Remember, more and more drought resistant means less and less work and watering once it's established. So a much easier garden to maintain. It's also a good plant for rain gardens, swale or areas with poor drainage. So think of that. It's drought resistant, but it also will do well in a rain garden. It seems very easy to get along with. It's just every
It's
person
beautiful.
should be that easy to get along with.
Right.
It will self-seed some. It stays in its place where you planted, but it might seed itself, throw seeds here and there, but not aggressively at all. Something that is just very easy to deal with. So don't worry about that. It'll grow in zones 3 to 8, and as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, it provides nectar to our butterflies, moths, hummingbirds. It provides caterpillars for our baby birds, and then the adult birds love the seeds of blue vervain.
All right, so here's a classic rose milkweed, also known as swamp milkweed, but rose sounds a lot prettier. This is one of the star plants that we absolutely need to be planting in our garden or any kind of milkweed to support our monarch butterflies and make sure that they continue to exist. So again, if it's a larval host plant for the monarch butterflies, it's also making caterpillars. And if you have this plant in your backyard, you will definitely see the butterfly or the caterpillars all over it eating the leaves, which is what they're supposed to do. It's also a favorite of many pollinators, so you'll see all sorts of creatures on these plants. You'll see bees, you'll see ants. Anything that's attracted to the nectar is gonna go to this plant, including hummingbirds. So
Mhm.
we've got a nectar source, we've got caterpillars, we've got insects, we've got seeds, which we looked at in that slide before with the downy material, those little downy things. That's how those seeds fly around and that's how it propagates itself. All of my seeds on my milkweed were stripped. All of them have been eaten now. They're all gone. I did harvest some, but the rest of them have been eaten. So they've got the nest material as well. This one does like medium to wet soil, hence the name swamp milkweed. It gets 3 to 4 feet tall and it blooms June through August. Some people say that the flowers smell like bubble gum. Do you agree with that?
That's not a bad way to put it. I always thought of it as vanilla, but
Vanilla,
it is
yeah.
it is a very, very pleasant smell. And I just was looking at here, attractive and elegant plant, and it truly is an attractive and elegant plant. And you hear the word milkweed, and it sounds like some ugly old scraggly thing on a roadside. This is truly an attractive and elegant plant.
Yeah, I have it planted in my backyard, but this summer I'm planting it in my front yard because why not? The more the more we can get in the ground, the better. And again, this one's good zones 3 to 9, so that's a lot of the country that can plant this plant. And if you're interested in other types of milkweed, you can check out our other video called Why Monarchs Matter, and we go over a multitude of different milkweeds for different light and soil conditions.
And looking over to the right, it really has it all going on. It provides nectar, caterpillars, insects, draws insects so the birds can feast on the insects. It has seeds, it has nest material. It's really got it all going on. Okay, wild bergamot.
Oh, look at that. That's my picture.
Yeah, look, it is your picture. It is, I mean, it's the same picture. Yes, look at that.
The same one.
Um, um, really, Monarda fistulosa, also sometimes called bee balm. Really, really, really a favorite of bees. I mean, we hope everybody loves bees, but if you're not a fan of bees, this is probably not the plant for you. But please reconsider your dislike for bees because they're just amazing in the services they provide for us. But it is a favorite of many of our native pollinators. And it too is a larval host plant for some of our butterflies and moths, and therefore provides food for baby birds. It will grow in full to part sun, dry to moist soil. Again, these plants are just so adaptable, dry to moist soil. Remember, a lot of them were meant to grow on the prairie, in where we have periods of time where we're flooding and we have a week where it doesn't stop raining, and then we have other periods of time where we don't get any rain for a month, and that's how they evolved. It gets 2 to 4 feet tall, blooms July through September, and when this thing is blooming, this is definitely the hot spot of the garden. Everybody's there. It's definitely the watering hole. Very easy to grow, and it's good in zones 3 to 9. Again, it provides nectar to our, butterflies, moths, hummingbirds, provides a ton of insects that those birds can find and feast on. And the birds also love the seeds of wild bergamot.
Next up is Ironweed, and I just love this name because it sounds so strong and it's so beautiful at the same time. And again, this is a powerhouse. Nectar, caterpillars, insects, and seeds. It's also very beneficial to our native bees. So really all of these plants have multiple purposes and functions within our garden. The hummingbirds will actually eat the nectar from this plant as well. It attracts more insects that feed the birds. The birds love the seeds. It is a host plant for the American lady butterfly and the ironweed borer moth. Again, we've got a moth that's named after this plant because of this special relationship between the two. This one does like full to part sun, medium to moist soil. This is going to be good for the back of your garden. It's 4 feet to 6 feet tall, but that huge pop of color is going to be amazing. And it's kind of skinny. I don't think this one branches out too much, does it, Kathy?
Not too much, no, it doesn't. But because it is tall, and it's, doesn't branch out too much, but it is, it's called ironweed. It has very strong stems, so it's not as prone to flopping over as some other taller plants.
Some of our other prairie plants need other prairie plants to help them stand up, but this one can do it on its own.
Exactly. And I planted that all along one side of my garage that gets a lot of water. It's a very wet area, and this just loves it. And I have seen that moth that you mentioned because I have the ironweed. So I'm telling you, you plant it, they'll come.
Amazing.
Where they were before I had my ironweed, because I can tell you most of my neighbors don't have ironweed, but they found my ironweed.
And that's cool too, how they can find these plants from who knows where they're coming from. It's
I
just
know.
amazing. They just pop up in your yard. As soon
It
as the
is
plant's there,
there they are.
there they are.
All right, great blue lobelia. Of course, and you probably get sick of hearing us say gorgeous plant, but they truly are. I mean, what can we say? So this is our native lobelia, and it pretty wide range in how tall it can get. It's going to depend on how much sun it gets and how much water it is. If it gets drier, this tends to like, a little bit more moisture, so it's going to grow a little bit taller if it's in a moister area. But it does well in full to part sun, and very attractive to pollinators and hummingbirds. Blooms July through September, not at all aggressive, very well behaved in our smaller urban landscapes, and loves damp clay. And boy, we have enough damp clay around here. So this is, loves damp clay. So if you have an area in your yard that never really completely dries out, or it takes a lot for it to dry out, this would be a great plant for you. It should be considered a short-lived perennial, but it will reseed itself. So the cluster should live on. It's just the one plant is dying out, but the seedlings are right there to take its place. And so therefore it might move around a little bit, but nothing crazy, well behaved, not aggressive. Zones 3 to 9, provides nectar that the hummingbirds and butterflies and moths love. And it's also providing a lot of caterpillars for those baby birds.
This one supports 6 species of butterflies and moths. Can you believe that?
Really,
6
this one little
species.
plant, really?
This one plant, pink washed looper moth, Pleves aquatic moth, greater black letter dart, spotted cutworm, red banded leaf roller moth, and the dark spotted pelthus. So we've got to get pictures of all of these so we can show them next time. But just fascinating. One plant and that many species of moths and butterflies
that need it for their very existence.
Yep.
And then our birds need those caterpillars for their very existence. It's all connected.
And timing too. I mean, it's pretty amazing how one plant will bloom at just the right time for the insects that it needs to support, which then support the birds and all the other life forms. So it's really just a magical dance of everything.
It really is. That's a
at one
great way to
time.
put it. That's a great way to put it. It's a magical dance of the timing of things, that they just co-evolved and they just belong together, and you'll have certain species of butterflies that they don't emerge from their larva form until it's time for their host plant that it's ready for them to lay. It's amazing.
So amazing. And this plant too is just so amazing. I mean, you don't get any cooler than that. Look at that flower. It's so exotic looking, and it's a native plant right here in the United States. So it's called rough blazing star. It's from the family of Liatris. There's some other blazing stars that are more cone shaped, but this one has these kind of button looking flowers. And the pollinators just love it. You'll see so many insects and bees on this plant. It also provides nectar for our hummingbirds. So if you want to attract more hummingbirds to your yard, definitely plant this plant. And it also provides seeds, which is kind of interesting because some of these plants you wouldn't think, oh, there's really obvious seeds, but they know how to find them. And then this one likes full to part sun, medium to dry soil, 2 to 3 feet tall, and it's going to bloom a little bit later, August and September. So it's a really nice accent to your goldenrods, which are yellow. So you've got the beautiful yellow and the purple together. And then this one's good zones 3 to 8.
Speaking of goldenrod, here we have a cute little bumblebee on showy goldenrod, which to me is the most beautiful form of goldenrod. Goldenrod is a keystone plant. We haven't mentioned keystone plants in this particular video, but keystone plant is one that has the most significant positive influence on our local ecosystem. And one of the main ways that we dedicate or consider something a keystone plant is if it hosts a wide variety of butterfly and moth caterpillars, because those caterpillars are just so life-giving to the birds, and then that goes all the way up the food chain. And as we said earlier, those birds are so essential to our environment. So a keystone plant is one that hosts a ton of caterpillars and is just you know, a vital plant for the health of our ecosystem. And goldenrod is one of those, and this species of goldenrod is absolutely gorgeous. Provides, you know, the other thing that makes it so keystone is it's providing its nectar and pollen in the late season, which is so critical, whether it be to our migrating monarchs or our insects that will be overwintering. It gives them that nutrition that they need to either do their migration or their wintering. It's some species of goldenrod can be a little bit on the aggressive side. Some can be a lot on the aggressive side, like Canada goldenrod, let's be honest. Showy goldenrod, not at all, because it doesn't spread by rhizomes. So really good, beautiful form of goldenrod for urban and suburban landscapes. And as you can see on the side here, it provides nectar. It provides caterpillars. It'll be loaded with insects that those birds can come by and you know, have a buffet on. The birds also love the seeds, and it's a really good companion plant to some of our asters. Looks beautiful blooming with some of our asters, which are also keystone plants. And this will grow in zones 3 to 8. Do you have any of the names of who feeds off of this? Because it's a keystone plant, there must be a load.
Many varieties of the checker spot butterfly use the showy goldenrod as a host plant. Okay. So there's several of them that will go to this plant. And speaking of our asters, this is again a late season bloomer and so beautiful, that purple color next to the yellow of the goldenrods. And this one is also going to provide nectar, caterpillars, insects, and seeds, all beneficial to our birds. The hummingbirds also love the nectar of this plant. And the next couple plants that we're looking at, the seed heads are a little bit more obvious. So when the petals fall off, the center of this stays as the seed head, and that's what they're going to be plucking the seeds off of. So birds love the seeds for this. Again, this is a keystone plant. If you don't want it to grow up to 5 feet tall, you can trim it back to 1/3 before it's blooming. So in June, you can trim it back with a Chelsea chop, and then you'll have a bushier looking plant. So that could be really beautiful in your landscape. It likes full to part sun, medium to wet soil. Again, it's blooming late August through October. It doesn't like super wet or super dry conditions, so just keep it medium wet. And then It does better with tall competition. Sometimes when some of these taller plants are growing next to other tall plants, it'll just, make them stronger and make them grow a little bit taller. And then this one does well in zones 3 to 8. And this one is the host plant for the pearl crescent butterfly and the Canadian conia moth.
Okay, just the other day I saw a butterfly outside that I have seen in other landscapes, like in, more of the forest preserves and so on. And so I knew it was a pearl crescent, but I had never seen one on my property before. But over the last few years, I've put in a lot of New England Aster, and here they are.
Wow. Amazing. And it's so cool when you can make the connection from something you've seen in nature in the forest preserve and it's there on your property and you're supporting that life.
And one day I was looking out the front window and I have a lot of New England Aster out in front, and I do cut it so that it stays shorter and bushier. And one day, I think it was last fall, there was a ton of birds out there that were migrating. I forget what species they were, but they weren't like common birds that we see here. And they were all over my asters, and I assumed that they were taking seeds, but then I realized that I saw one that I saw it pluck up a caterpillar off of the aster. So they were just like descended on these asters and had a feast of caterpillars.
It's amazing. Sometimes we don't even see all the caterpillars everywhere,
Oh,
but they're there. That's
I had no idea
amazing.
that there was any. And then I see them eat with them in their mouth and picking it off them. Like, I never even knew they were out there.
You've got caterpillar McDonald's in your front yard.
Okay, Prairie Coreopsis. The seeds that Coreopsis produces are some of the favorite seeds of our birds. Finches especially love it. Our goldfinches love it. So these seeds must be very tasty. I've never tried them, but the birds are telling me they're really awesome. It's a very, it's like a beautiful, bright yellow smile in the garden, very unassuming plant, just, like a pretty little 2-foot plant with these pretty yellow flowers. And it likes more sun. It'll grow in partial to full and blooms June through August. It's tolerant of poor soil conditions and drought. So this really does tend to like it on the dry side. So if you want a cheerful flower, small plant, likes it dry, doesn't need a lot of watering, tolerant of poor growing, poor soil conditions, but gives our birds, caterpillars, pollinators love it, and the birds just adore those seeds. This is the plant for you. Zones 3 to 8.
So elegant. I love that plant.
I
Oh,
do
and
too.
here's another favorite.
We love
We
them
just
all.
love
Let's
all.
face
Yeah.
it.
I don't think you can go wrong with any Blackeyed Susans, but the showy Blackeyed Susan is particularly special because it's got a beautiful flower head and is just considered a little bit showier than the normal Blackeyed Susan. So anything in the Rudbeckia family is what this flower is coming from. It grows 2 to 4 feet tall, full to partial sun, medium soil. I think this plant really can tolerate a lot of different soil conditions. Blooms July, August, September, so you get a lot of color for 3 months. And this is good in zones 3 to 9. Again, this one you can see with this seed head. Actually, these are all little flowers, I believe, in this seed head, aren't they? For the Blackeyed Susans.
Yes, yes.
So tiny little flowers make up that cone part, and that's also where the seeds are going to be after all the petals kind of fall away. So that looks really stunning in your winter landscape, and of course it's feeding your birds. And again, just all the caterpillars and insects that like this plant are going to support our birds too.
And who can have a native garden without having some purple coneflower? And who can have purple coneflower without there being birds all over it? I don't think anybody. So not only is this an absolute favorite of our pollinators, especially butterflies just adore this plant, but because the pollinators love it so much and they do such a great job of pollinating it and then these beautiful, and then that beautiful seed head comes, and man, do the birds love those seed heads. The goldfinch and the sparrows just go crazy over these seeds. But hummingbirds also love it. And this is such a wonderful plant. If you've not planted native before and you're just dipping your toes in the water, this is a great plant to start with. It looks great in any garden. It looks great in any size garden. It's just a beautiful, well-behaved, well-structured plant that you're just going to be, so happy with. And it's also very adaptable. I mean, it likes medium wet to medium dry soil. So very adaptable, full to part sun. I can say it has a long growing season. It blooms July through September. And the cool thing about these flowers, each one of these flowers seems to last a long time. So it's a beautiful flower that's very easy to grow. And it will self-seed itself, but nothing that's unmanageable by any means. Zones 4 to 8. And again, look at everything that this provides. It provides nectar. Hummingbirds like it. It provides a lot of caterpillars for our babies, insects for our birds, and those wonderful seed heads that just, in the fall, they're devoured.
The goldfinches particularly love that plant, right?
They really do.
They like the seeds. This one as well, you can see the seed head is very obvious on the last couple of plants that we looked at. So it's very easy to imagine a bird sitting on top of that seed head and plucking it all out. Looks like maybe some of these have gotten a little bit cleaned or they just haven't finished blooming yet. But gray-headed coneflower, another very elegant, beautiful plant. It can grow 3 to 6 feet tall, and it does like full sun. This one, dry to moist soil, so that's pretty easy, a good range. Again, it's going to be blooming at the height of summer and into the fall from July, August to September. Beautiful movement in the garden. I'm not sure exactly what this is referring to, Kathy. What do you think?
Beautiful movement would mean it's a tall, kind of willowy, delicate stems. So they don't fall over, but they move a lot in the breeze. So it gives you movement. When the wind blows, you can see, just like some of our grasses give you beautiful movement where it's something that's blowing a lot. This catches the wind and blows a lot too, but it doesn't like fall over and stay down. It just blows gently in the breeze. So it can be very peaceful.
Wow. I can imagine this combined with some side oats grandma, which we're going to go over, would be a really nice pairing together.
Absolutely.
So again, this one zones 3 to 6 or 3 to 9, I'm sorry, and caterpillars, insects, and seeds. That's what this one's going to do for you.
So as Lexi mentioned, side oats grandma. So now we're going to get to a couple of grasses, and grasses are so important for birds. Not only all those wonderful seeds that they provide, and we don't think of caterpillars on our grasses, but they are host to a number of species of butterflies and moths. So there is a lot of caterpillar activity on our grasses, but the habitat that it creates, they can go down there and they can get shelter. Some birds actually will nest on the ground at the base of grasses. Not all birds nest. It's hard to believe when you think that they're going for shelter. Not all birds nest in the air in the trees. Some birds nest on the ground, and this gives them great shelter, and it also gives them good nest building materials if they are building up high. So our grasses are just so important to our birds, both for food and for habitat. This particular grass, side oats grandma, doesn't get too tall, 2 to 3 feet. It does like full sun, medium to dry soil, and it just looks beautiful when it's flowering in the late summer. And it's a very attractive shorter grass, very well behaved, stays in place. And again, it creates that beautiful movement where it blows in the breeze in the garden. So it gives you a very peaceful rustle in the garden.
All right, and the last plant that we're looking at tonight is little blue stem. This is also a grass full to part sun. It likes medium to dry soil. And again, this is going to provide habitat for the birds. I believe sparrows do love these last two grasses, and in our area, we have a place called the Grasslands, and you can see these plants coming up, and they're there for a reason because of these low nesting birds that really need these for their cover. It'll bloom July through October, and then it turns a really beautiful color in the fall. I believe it's like an orange kind of yellowish color in the fall. It's tolerant of poor soil, and it can also do well against salt. So if you wanted to plant these along a driveway, that would be a great option to give you some texture and color, and also provide habitat and important things for our birds. It won't establish against tall competition, so you don't want to plant this next to anything super tall, but on its own, it's going to do great. And then with some shorter plants, it'll do just fine. It'll bloom July through October, and this is good in zones 3 to 9. And again, it also supports caterpillars, will provide seeds and that habitat.
Beautiful blue color in the garden.
Okay, this is kind of one of my passion projects for this summer. I've tried all sorts of things on my windows. I live next to kind of a wooded area with a lot of oak trees, and I've put out bird feeders before. And now with the native plants, I want to make sure that I'm not the source of any problems with window collisions for birds. And part of the problem you'll see here is these windows that we have, sometimes they're glazed, they have different treatments, but they actually look like mirrors. And the birds think that they're just flying right up into the sky. But they're actually flying and hitting our windows. And sometimes they survive, and sometimes tragically they do not. So what we can do to protect them, a lot of people have seen these little decals with birds or different shapes that you can put on your windows. Those are only effective if you place them very close together. So this nice simple pattern of just dots has actually been proven by the Audubon and American Bird Conservancy to be a great solution. So not only does it look good, but the dots are spaced just the right space apart so that it looks attractive, but the birds can also recognize that this is a flat surface and they're not flying into the sky. So this particular brand is called featherfriendly.com, and you can go to featherfriendly.com/residential. Great resource, great people. I've actually talked to them. They've helped me understand how to install and put up the decals on my window. We'll be doing a video on this coming up. So if you're interested in it,
Are you
look
gonna
for that.
videotape you doing it so we can, so
I
that's
am.
cool. Do
Yes.
you know, do they go on the inside or the outside?
They go on the outside, and then for surfaces like this that look like a mirror, you're going to want to use the white dots. But if you have something like a clear fence, like say around a pool, or if you have a basketball hoop, back part for where the hoop is, and that's glass, those require a black dot. So there's different options for the different treatments on your glass. But if your windows look like this, and a lot of ours do, these white dots are going to be the option for you.
Wow. Can't wait for that video.
Yeah. Okay, and then one other resource that we wanted to share is Cornell Lab has this amazing website called allaboutbirds.org. So you can learn about birds in your area. Like we said, we're in Illinois, but this covers all of the birds within the United States. You can learn about their migration patterns. You can listen to their bird calls. So lots of different information about what they eat and what they look like, and also how to identify the males from the females, from the juveniles, and just really start to become a birding expert, because it's really fun to go on a walk in a forest preserve or a nature preserve, and you're the one showing off all your knowledge about the birds, right, Kathy?
That's right. That's right. And then people look at you, oh my gosh, she's one of those birders. Yes, I am, and I'm proud of it.
I'm a bird nerd. And this next one, I actually used this yesterday for the first time, and it blew my mind. So this is an app called Merlin Bird ID. It's free. It's also from Cornell Lab. Download it. All you do is click this button, record birds around me. It'll start listening to everything. And then as each one is singing, it'll pop up and say, this is an American robin. This is a yellow-rumped warbler. So even if you can't see them, the app is picking them up, and this is a great way to train your ear for the bird songs, the bird calls, and it's just really fun to geek out and try to figure out what's around you. And sometimes you'll see the birds, after you hear them, sometimes you won't. but you can always learn more about them too. You can click on the links and read more about them.
That is cool. And then also we listed some of the birds' favorite plants, and we showed you why they're some of the favorite plants of birds. But they're not the only plants that birds love. And so to see even more native plants that are good for urban and suburban landscapes, check out the native plant selector on our website, sagmoraine.org. And there's a ton of other plants on there, flowering plants, grasses and sedges, shrubs, vines. So check out our native plant selector and you will find even more good native plants for your yard and good native plants for our birds. I also just want to put a little plug in for our 3rd annual native plant sale. If you live in our area, it will be on June 1st from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Moraine Valley Community College. Part of our plant sale is pre-order packages that give you that a professional designer designed a garden and you get the design so you know how to arrange your plants, and then you also have the plants. And anybody from the area that sees this video and purchases by May 12th, put in the code to check out birds 10 and you'll get a 10% discount. We will also have thousands of native plants available for individual purchase that day, I want to say. But this is our one of the packages that we've arranged this year is our bird banquet package that thrives in full to part sun. And you can see that you can get it in 3 sizes, 10 plants, 50 plants, or 100 plants. So it can be anywhere from 25 square feet to 100 square feet. All of these gardens provide habitat for the birds, food for the birds. They provide, multi-season color, texture, and throughout all the seasons, spring, summer, fall, and even winter. And here are the varieties that, say, for example, are in the, I believe that in the 50 plant package, and a lot of the ones, that we went over, the wild bergamot, the foxglove, so it contains all of the plants that we just went over because we wanted to create a package that the birds just love, 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 and it will supply them with everything they need for a good, robust life. And with that, we're going to say goodnight to everyone. The birds, butterflies, and bees, thank you for your interest in native plants. And remember to subscribe to our channel so that you'll get notification when we put out more videos. And especially the one where we see Lexi up on her ladder putting, bird film on the outside of her windows.
I can't wait. I just hope I don't fall off that ladder. I'm starting with the lower windows. Maybe the upper windows we'll do a little bit later.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining.